All right, we're just here to have fun. Good evening and welcome to Andrew's Clubhouse in this new format with this new lens. I'm using my old DSLR camera that I've had for about at least 10 years. Yeah, I thought I'd sort of dust it off and use this for the intro of this video, where I'm going to repurpose a commentary about yoga and about Charlie Backos and Father Ben's opinions about yoga. And I just wanted to do a proper introduction to the episode just to help sort of navigate you and help you understand what the heck is going on, because the video that you're about to see was part of a longer hour and 6 minute behemoth, and I had to shorten it for a bunch of reasons, and I think it just makes more sense with YouTube just to make it a little bit shorter. So yeah, it's going to start with a intro by a yogi talking about how Christians perceive yoga as satanic. I think his words are extremely quite wise, well thought out, and I think it's worthwhile just to make note of what he says, because after that you're going to enter into the ignorant world of Charlie Backos, Father Ben, and the Lebanese Maronite order in Australia. And I think it's worthwhile just to contextualize what they're saying and to understand that it really is just a narrow-minded opinion from an extraordinarily conservative church that is turning a lot of people off, right? It is, how would you say, radicalizing, right, current members and turning away a lot of other members. But, you know, that's just my opinion, and you know, who cares about my opinion? Not many people, just around 6,000 subscribers, I suppose, which is a platform and an audience base significantly larger than Charlie Backos and the Stand for Truth podcast on YouTube. But I understand that a lot of people go to their local parishes and a lot of people locally agree with them, but that's fine. Internationally, you know, I think that they don't really have much of an audience base outside of the Christian faith, the narrow-minded conservative Christian base, because what they're saying is a little bit archaic and kind of a little bit silly, in my opinion, you know, quite ignorant, but that's just me, innit? But I hope you enjoy this commentary. I made it with the intention of being fair and as honest as possible and as humble as possible. That, you know, I'm not a very faithful Catholic, you know, but I want to be. But I see these representations and it turns me off the faith, unfortunately, you know. But who am I, you know? Just a humble, meek, broken wretch in it. But hey, that's just me. I hope you enjoy this episode. Please like and subscribe and throw me a comment. I love hearing your comments. Alright? Love you. Bye.
Have you ever thought of yoga as being satanic? Well, if you haven't, and I certainly haven't, it seems that there are plenty of people who do. There are people who think that yoga and asanas are of the devil. Let's start with the pastor of a megachurch in the United States who preaches to his congregation that yoga, with all its contortions called asanas, is evil because Hinduism is demonic. Then there's a Catholic priest in North Ireland who's on record to have said, If you do yoga, you're headed for the kingdom of darkness and will soon be drawn towards Satan and the fallen angels. There was quite an uproar to the priest's views from the local Hindu community, who asked the Pope to discipline the priest. Nothing has come of that yet, and perhaps it's because the Vatican's chief exorcist holds a similar view. He told the London Telegraph that doing yoga leads to a belief in Hinduism and that all Eastern religions are based on a false belief of reincarnation. Now, the father concluded by saying, practicing yoga is satanic, it leads to evil, just like reading Harry Potter. Wow. I'm not a fan of Harry Potter, so I may be spared some of the torments of hell, but I am a practitioner of yoga, and as a Bhakti yogi, I'm also identified as being a Hindu. But I still feel safe from going to hell because upon receiving a Bhagavad Gita, Pope John Paul II had said, I understand something about the deep spiritual concepts which are upheld in India, and I appreciate them. I've heard about Krishna, and Krishna is great.
I want to talk to you about Father Ben from the Lebanese Maronite Church, who's talking to Charlie Bachos about yoga, all right? I saw this podcast and I absolutely adored it. I love it from the bottom of my heart. And this father seems really, really, really okay, you know? And they're talking about yoga, and I'm going to kind of do my commentary on it, and then we'll just sort of go from there, right? So Charlie Bachos wants to ask a Lebanese Maronite priest about the morality of yoga. Awesome, right? Two men that know a lot about this subject, you know.
Very controversial.
Can we talk about this one?
Of course we can. Of course we can.
Because I hear it all the time that I'm Christian, I do yoga, it's just for more exercise, and I'm only doing the breathing exercises, I'm not doing it as a spiritual thing. I know how bad it can be, but again...
I know how bad it could be for Christians who do yoga and do breathing exercises. How bad it can be. The reason why that annoys me is because I had a nervous breakdown, right, last year, and I was struggling with mania. Things like yoga and meditation would have been great for me. You know what I mean? These are good things that people can practice alongside their religion, and I could tell you why, okay? But let's, you know, continue this sort of like toxic talk about things that they know nothing about.
People will say, who are you, Charlie? You know, I'm a Christian myself, I'm a Catholic, and I do yoga, and it makes me feel good. What's the church's stance on yoga, and how do you explain this to people at home that maybe, sorry if I'm offending anybody, but if they're doing yoga, what's your the church's opinion on it?
Okay, so Father Ben is not the church. Father Ben is a father, okay? He's a priest from our church in a area in Sydney, Australia, in the world, in the universe, okay? He doesn't represent the church, okay? But he's got an opinion, right? And his opinion isn't invalid, okay? It's just, we'll see what it is.
Yeah, well look, we need to understand firstly what yoga is. Yoga has become extremely commercialized. It's become almost a pastime, a hobby for many men and women. And most of them will just look at it as a bunch of stretches. But if you actually want to respect yoga and its traditions, then there's no way to formally Christianize it.
Okay, so he's saying we have to understand what yoga is, and then proceeds to not explain what yoga is. He just says what yoga is not, right? Or rather, he says that yoga is just commercialized. So he doesn't state what it is. He just says that whatever it is, it's highly commercialized, right? Which is, you know, very insightful.
Baptize it, as we might say, and make it holy.
I've never heard of Christian yoga. I've heard
yeah. It's out there. It exists.
So, a priest in a church is giving us his opinion on yoga, right? And both of them know that there's Christians out there that practice the two together, that have found some way to merge the two, right? And they just dismiss it out of hand as something laughable and silly, which, you know, is annoying.
There will be many people that fly the flag for all of this, but ultimately at its core, yoga encourages what we call monism, which is basically I am one with everything. An enlightenment is, I think, what their goal is at the end of the day.
Yoga promotes this oneness, monism, right? And by the way, I don't know because I'm not an expert, okay? But he's still not saying what yoga is, and then now he's given his opinion on what he thinks, not what he knows, not what the research has told him, not what his experience in yoga has taught him, because he hasn't experienced it before. I'm assuming he hasn't spoken to a practitioner of it, right? This is just his opinion, right? His very narrow-minded, small opinion, okay? And it doesn't matter.
And the way they achieve that is through the breathing and the poses and the mantras that they pray.
Yeah.
Now, the Christian that does yoga and is enthusiastic about yoga will say, "Well, I don't do the mantras."
Yeah, they say that all the time.
Yeah, I don't do anything like this.
Your mantra can be very, very, very Christian, right? When I was struggling with mania, all right, when I was struggling to get grips on reality, right? And I didn't do any of the research, all right? I didn't do anything, right? But one of my friends practiced meditation, right? And I just found that just breathing, right? Calmly breathing and praying to Jesus Christ, right? Both our Lord and Savior in it, right? Helped me get through a panic attack, right? And then whenever I felt like I was losing touch with reality, right? And I was spiraling, right? I had particular mantras, right? About God, Jesus, my sons, right? That really prevented me from spiraling, right? I believe, my opinion, right? Andrew's Clubhouse, from the Institute of Andrew's Clubhouse, right? Believe that yoga, meditation, stretching, okay, and mantras, all right, can be very Christian, can bring you closer to Jesus Christ, not God, not oneness, right? But you know, and by the way, if you want it to be oneness, it can be oneness. Be oneness. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But you can certainly merge the two, okay? Just like how Christmas, right? Lebanese Maronite. You know your Christmas tree? Do you know the ornament? Do you know that time of the year? Right? It's a pagan festival, right? That celebrates Saturnalia. I forgot the specific word, but Christmas, okay, grew out of an evolution of a pagan festival, for goodness sakes, right? So, you know, celebrating Christmas, right, with Christmas trees and gifts, okay, is by his own kind of rationale, devil worship or demonic, for goodness sakes, right?
But we have to understand that posture matters.
Posture does matter.
Posture is important. So if a person might be innocently walking into a yoga class, you might not be participating in what maybe the yoga teacher is saying, but the yoga teacher is saying something, and then you're entering into a particular stretch or pose that has its roots in a deep tradition of something that is not Christian.
Yeah, like pagan festivals.
So we have to be very mindful of that. Okay, you can stretch. Okay, you can pull out the massage gun. You can do all sorts of things.
I'm glad that Father Ben gives us his consent to stretch and pull out yoga guns. I was really worried.
And I don't mean to make light of it.
He's not making light of it. He's just being extremely narrow-minded, right? And he's turning people away from the faith with such ignorant kind of views of something that could be quite positive, right? And healing for people.
At the end of the day, its foundations are not in Christianity. And at the end of the day, if you were to speak to traditional yogis, like the actual teachers and instructors, they would be highly offended that we've almost commercialized.
This is called a straw man argument, right? What yogis is he talking about? All right, who are offended? How many has he talked to? What the hell is he talking about? I'd imagine that a lot of yogis will be quite flattered that Christians have found a way to sort of merge the two. All right, I actually got I watched the video where a yogi had a really, really thoughtful response to people that feel that yoga is demonic, right? It was a really, really lovely response as part of a video on a pastor talking about, the evils of yoga. And I think I'll feature it here.
So there's a conversation about the exclusivity of Christianity, and I think Christianity is pretty clear that it is the only way. Jesus taught this, that I'm the only way to the Father. No one comes to the Father except through me. The apostles preached there's no other name under heaven by which men shall be saved other than Jesus. So that's a pretty clear conversation. And so that would lead to a conversation about Hindu ideas versus Christian ideas, and where those things clash. And reincarnation is certainly one of those things. Views of God, one God versus many. All of that is an important conversation. Then there's the question of yoga and Harry Potter and these kind of things, which is a second kind of piece of this conversation. So the first one, I think Christianity is pretty clear. It's like Jesus is the only way. Now we're in a conversation with world religions. What about Judaism? What about Islam? What about Hinduism? What about Buddhism? Can you, do you go to heaven if you believe those things? And the New Testament's pretty clear. Jesus is the only way. And then there's this question about the practice and methodology of yoga, or, depending on your version of it, how far you go with it, I would think would be the Christian response, because there's a certain aspect of society that looks at it as stretching. There's certain stretches that you do in order to be healthy, in order to keep your body healthy. And I always think of the story in these conversations in 2 Kings, where you have this guy who is part of this other religion, and he comes to know God, the God of Israel, and he has to go in with the people because he's a servant of one of the pagan guys, and he has to go in to the temple and do this thing with them. And he's like, is it okay if I go? He asked the prophet of Israel, is it okay if I go and do this as long as I'm praying to Yahweh? And the answer is yes. And there's this piece where there's certain methodologies that Christianity's point is to redeem things. And I think there's versions of this, where you take stretches. One of the neglected things in Christianity in the West over the last couple hundred years has been spiritual practices. If you go read Richard Foster's books, Celebration of Discipline, or you read Dallas Willard or other spiritual writers, they talk about the idea of meditation is actually a Christian discipline. If you go back and read so many different segments of Christianity for the last 2,000 years, meditation and prayer and solitude have been massive ways Christians have focused in actually connecting with Jesus. It's just a matter of filling your mind and your heart with reflections on Christ as you literally meditate. Meditation is a thing. It's not to be hijacked as meditation is by definition belongs to Eastern, ideologies and religions and things that aren't Christianity. And that's why Christians stay away from it, because they don't want to be seen as people who meditate. But it's like literally been a part of Christian history. It's just, what are you actually filling that time with? Christianity has this beautiful ethic of redeeming the things of the world for the sake of Christ. And, people say these same arguments about, Christmas trees, and, we shouldn't use Christmas trees. And, Easter was a pagan festival. It's like, yeah. And then Christianity came along and redeemed them into this beautiful thing.
All right. So let's continue.
Because again, it's not Christian.
Is it Hindu or Buddhist? Or
Hindu, I believe. Okay. Yeah. But there are many forms of yoga.
Okay.
Many forms of yoga with many mantras.
There are many forms of yoga. Some of them can be Christian, yoga. And perhaps they don't even have to call it Christian yoga. They can, these two things can evolve with each other, and they can merge. Yoga and stretching can be something that's quite religious, right? You can pray as you stretch, for goodness sake. Stretching is fantastic for your muscles, right? For your well-being. There's nothing wrong with it. There's a way to merge the two. This is just ignorant, closed-minded thinking from a priest whose parish has created a devil-worshipping priest, for goodness sakes, right? So for goodness sakes, man, the hypocrisy here is incredible, because in this episode they mention how there's a priest in my local parish that has been reprimanded or investigated for devil worshipping. Okay? What do they say about that? Well, I know what they say about that. It's horrid, and they don't want to talk about it because, again, they don't want to focus in the plank in their own eye in this divine Lenten season.
Now, the majority of people that do yoga as their Sunday obligation is ridiculous. It's a lot, in our country, in the country we live in.
It's a straw man. Who does yoga as their Sunday obligation? Who in the world? Who in Father Ben's head, right? His bigoted head, his big bigoted head, his overweight bigoted head. Yeah, he should do some yoga. Does he think that people, Maronite Catholics, because we're just talking about Maronite Catholics, I can't speak to anyone else, right? But who in his straw man head, who in his head is he straw manning to think that instead of going to church, someone's doing yoga? Like who and why? And if they're going to talk about that, give specifics and talk about that specifically.
In Australia, Sunday is about, the long walk, the yoga session, the chilling out at the pub with the mates and all that kind of thing for the community that doesn't believe in God, ultimately.
Now, I think that chilling out with mates, having beers on a Sunday, going for long walks and yoga is better than going to a local parish where the priest is a devil worshipper in it.
So it's become so much of an industry that people make money out of it now. Yoga's become something that is almost like a hybrid with other forms of stretching. It's become so commercialized that it's almost, I believe it's disrespectful to the original yogis and to their practices. Mm-hmm. Because we wouldn't like it very much if they took our mass, for example,
and made it into
something, and made it something different where they made it a hybrid of something else. So, look, I've got great respect. You have what you have, but don't bring it into our religion and say that, it's okay. Now, there'll be many people out there that will disagree with what I've just said, but I always say,
I do.
We have our Lord, we have our tradition of prayer, we're in the winning team. No need to mix things up and get fancy with it.
He's in the winning team where the overwhelming majority of his parishioners normalize domestic violence, drug abuse, and significant mental health, and their priests are devil worshippers, and forget about Maronites, but Catholics only represent 47% of the population, right? And has been declining in it. But apparently it's come back up, which I fully support, but he's not part of the winning team, and these thoughts isn't the winning team, right? This isn't indicative of a winning team, for goodness sakes, right? I've got a bigger following than Stand for Truth podcast, and I started it during my nervous breakdown, for goodness sakes.
We have what we need.
But I have these conversations when you say there's a lot of people who disagree with what we're saying. I have these conversations with the Christians that disagree with what we're saying. Yeah. So that's the biggest problem.
I'm a Christian that disagrees with what he's saying, but I still love both of them. I want to, love, hug, and pray with both of them if they'd have me, but I don't think they'd have me. I think they're still upset at me for having a manic episode all over my local parish. Ugh, I found it quite inconvenient.
Watching, and they realise that what you're saying is the truth, and they've been doing yoga for 20 years. Well, what do they do?
Mind you, nothing that Father Ben said was true or false. He was just talking about his opinion, for goodness sakes. Like, what was he saying, right? That's true. right? Nothing. Oh, I suppose yoga has become highly commercialized, but I don't even think that that's true. I don't think there was any true statement in this clip.
Do they go to confession?
They can just stop.
Okay.
And they can think about what they've been doing, and they can read into it. Not many people will read into what they've been doing or its origins. I mean, same thing in our faith.
I'm going to post a clip to a pastor reacting to people believing that yoga is sinful and bad in this clip, because I think that's really important. People that have been doing yoga for 20 years and are finding it super beneficial, don't stop. Continue doing it. Perhaps reflect, maybe. And if you think that there are components of it that's taking you away from your faith, and you feel that you have this deep sort of faith that you want to sort of nurture, and you think that maybe yoga might take you away from it, perhaps reflect on that, but don't stop, okay? If it's doing you good, for goodness sakes, right?
Think about our faith and how little people know about our faith. But they get into it and they live their faith the way they think they should live their faith. And 20 years later, they might come back and say, I didn't know this was one of the things that you can't do as a Christian. And now they realize, okay, now you realize it, repent, stop.
What the fuck is he talking about? What do you mean? Yoga is one of the things that you can't do as a Christian. Why? What particular component of it are you engaging in that is sinful and requires you to stop? This kid is on shabs.
And move forward. And life will go on. But the whole practice of yoga.
Why? What's the reason? What's the reason that he's given? Like, he hasn't given any reason. Yoga's highly commercialized. Monism, I don't know what the hell that is, promotes this oneness and unity with God. Is that why? Really? That's it? What? When I pray, I feel at one with Jesus. What are you talking about, you idiot? What do you mean by God? Who's your God? What if Jesus is your God? The Trinity. Okay. Don't stop. It's not a sin. The fact that he thinks he's making a point is laughable and stupid, but I love him. He's lovely. I'll pray for him in it.
Is a sensitive one to a lot of people because of some of its proven health benefits.
Okay, that's where it gets tricky.
And that's when it becomes tricky. Are you saying you don't want me to be healthy? Mm-hmm. Of course I want you to be healthy.
So he's conceding that there is proven health benefits.
The roots of what you're participating in. Mm-hmm. And not a lot of people understand or know the roots of what they're participating in. Okay. Because it's become so...
Understand the roots of what you're participating in, still participate in them. There's a way for you to merge the two, all right? There's nothing wrong with that, okay? Christianity has grown and borrowed from so many other different religions and faiths and cultures, for goodness sakes, right? That in and of itself isn't any reason for you to stop participating in yoga, okay? It just isn't, all right? This priest, I understand he's passionate and I get it. I get that he thinks he's right, but I also understand how stubborn Maronite Catholics are and how wrong-headed they can be, all right? And this is a perfect example of it, all right? This is a narrow-minded, conservative view and this really unhealthy fear of the other and other cultures, right? It is disgraceful in a way. Anyway, I don't agree with it.
It's harmless because I walk in, I've got a 1 hour lunch break during the week. Yeah. I go and do my half an hour yoga session at the studio down the road and it's all good, no problem. I feel great about myself, come back to work. I can do the rest of the afternoon and then on Sunday I go to mass. I can balance everything. But we need to again understand the posture, the pose, the consent.
That scene that he describes sounds heavenly. How lovely is that? You can fit in a yoga session, a gym session, right? A lovely self-care session for an hour, and then go to church and everything is fine and happy, and he's going to undermine that because of some narrow-minded, dumb view of something that he doesn't even understand.
I'm going to do this. Now, whether you are inviting things or not, you are basically, when you're doing that pose, you're participating in a pose that's been done for hundreds of years, and all the way like back to ancients. And when they were doing those poses, they were, what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't calling on deities, but those poses actually meant something.
Like the ancient pagan religions, right, that Christmas sprang up from, okay? You know, Santa Claus, I just, God, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Look, this guy, look, yoga's fine, okay? If it's giving you health benefits, right? If you're engaging in those postures, right? And you receive physical and mental benefits from it, continue to do it, okay? Don't worry what Father Ben says. Don't freak out, okay? You'll be okay. Everything will be okay. I think that's enough for that. Oh. All right. Hui. Is that it? Is that a long one? I don't even know. I made notes. I tried to structure this as best as I can, because this is kind of like the penultimate episode, and then episode 100 is going to be, I don't know, an important one for me, I suppose. I really enjoyed making it. I really enjoyed making this episode. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something about me, about my story, and about my community. You know what I mean? And you know, I hope you're slightly better for it. If there's anything that I said that you disagree with, you feel free to comment. You know, I reply to all my comments. I want to learn. I want to understand, right? And I want to impart as best I can in it, right? I hope you've learned something. I hope my audience can teach me something, right? So please, like, subscribe, give me a comment. And yeah, I love you so much. Thank you so much for watching. All right. Bye. Ugh. That was fun.
Say a prayer for me. Love you so much. Love you so much. Love you so